Welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience, brought to you by Taylor Healthcare. Subscribe now and stay on the forefront of the digital healthcare revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience podcast presented by Taylor Healthcare. I'm your host, Chris Civit-Therese, and today I'm joined by Rob Carroll, Senior Director of Business Operations and Performance Improvement for the Care Continuum at Kaiser Permanente, Georgia. He's been with KP Georgia since 2018, holding positions with the Southeast Permanente Medical Group and the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan. Prior to joining KP, Rob held numerous positions in both the provider and payer sectors and earned his MBA and MHA from Georgia State University. Welcome to the podcast, Rob, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
So technology has always been a major driver in terms of performance improvement. That's perhaps never been truer than it is today. And on this episode, we'll be discussing how the current environment of rapidly evolving technology is affecting this space. So to kick us off, Rob, can you talk a little bit about your role at Kaiser Permanente and some of the things you're working on?
So Kaiser Permanente's organizational structure is composed of Permanente medical groups. So those are 8 self-governed, physician-led, multi-specialty groups that represent over, I believe, 20,000 physicians at this point. Permanente medical groups obviously play a crucial role in providing medical care within the Kaiser Permanente system. They are the P and KP. We have the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, which is the entity that employs me. That's the focus on healthcare, health coverage, insurance. We also work in operations with our PMG partners. Our goal is to ensure that our members have access to high quality care and services, and that's a big part of our partnership with PMG. The Kaiser Foundation hospitals are responsible for operating our hospitals, and the hospitals work in tandem with the other entities, and they obviously provide medical services to the KP members. So as I mentioned, I work on the health plan side in the continuum of care. The continuum is responsible for ensuring that members experience seamless and coordinated experiences throughout their healthcare journey. Broadly speaking, I would say that the continuum comprises the areas of emergency care, acute care, post-acute services, to include home health, DME, behavioral health care management outside of primary behavioral health care, complex case management, transitions of care. So my role encompasses non-clinical function to support all of the clinical areas in the continuum. So my team focuses on partnering with business intelligence to ensure that analytical needs are met. There's a component of project management, process improvement, financial and business management, and that we also use technology and automation where possible to streamline operations, which is obviously part of the central part of this discussion right now. Predictive analytics is a big phrase in healthcare. And just like everybody else, we're swimming in data and we're trying best how to optimize that data. And due to the way that Kaiser is structured, so, we don't operate on a fee for service model, right? So the healthier our members are, the better it is for them, the better it is for us. So we're really focusing on predictive analytics to identify upstream factors that influence admissions. Because, our goal is to keep people out of the hospital, not in the hospital. Like I said, value-based care is obviously another hot word that everybody says, but not everybody's really implementing. And that's, I think, one of the great things about KP is that is our model. We live and die by it. So
yeah, absolutely. And a unique organization for a lot of reasons and a pioneering organization for a lot of reasons.
Cool.
I had the opportunity to tour several years ago the Innovation Center out in the Bay Area. And the way that KP thinks about and leverages technology is obviously, as kind of core to the reason why, you're so successful as it is, from a medicine perspective. So I'm really curious, in what ways are you seeing technology being leveraged today to enhance efficiency across that continuum of care at Kaiser Permanente, particularly through, your lens of process improvement, process automation, and the like?
With KP, in current state, we try to automate as many things as possible through our electronic medical record, which is Epic. Before we look at anything else, we really try to leverage our EMR as much as humanly possible. That's why we spent a lot of money on it. It's also, the single source of truth for our members' records. So we want to try to use that as much as possible, because the more you bring in third-party applications, the more complicated it gets. You have all these integrations and then so on and so on. So really important is that we automate as many things as possible through Epic. So we have regular meetings that we have with a group called System Solutions and Deployment. So they act as our thought partners for how to improve EMR-based workflows. So we might have an idea for what we want to happen. So if we want to automate referral intake process, or, I want to automate faxes instead of having to upload faxes. Let's say we want them to be digitally uploaded, through like an RPA solution or something like that. We can bring those ideas to System Solutions and Deployment, and they will kind of help us think through what are Epic's native capabilities, so that we don't have to go outside of KP for a third-party vendor to bring in what we need. That's not always the case. Our EMR is not a panacea for everything. So we do have different groups that we can go through. So we do have an enterprise automation services team, which kind of helps build industrial, I'll call them industrial large-scale unattended automation. So if there's some kind of repetitive process that is going to require a lot of man hours, it's going to add, it's like non-value adding time, or something that can just be done with relatively predictable rules. They will help us build those large scale automations. They also run a group called the Citizen Developer Program, which is trying to scale individual users to leverage RPA technologies. And that's just an example. But that's another way that we're trying to democratize automation and technology through the organization, and they're a great group. We really use them a lot. We also have a group that is centered around process improvement called human-centered design. Human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving that kind of starts with underlying needs or behaviors or experiences for the people that we're designing a product, service, or system for. So the core principle of human-centered design is to empathize with users or beneficiaries. We ensure that their perspectives and needs help guide the development process from conception all the way through implementation. So let's give an example of, let's say we're designing a new functionality within the application, like our KP application. We say fail fast to succeed quicker, right? So, we want to iterate as many times as possible. So we might prototype a tech solution, like some different function within our application. And that doesn't mean it has to be like, we have developers who are like building this new functionality and then we're testing out, but rather we'll actually bring in the end user. So we'll have member committees will come in and they'll help look at, like, here's this prototype, how does this look? What would you want to add to this? So we're always getting member feedback and input into the design component of something technical. And it doesn't have to actually be a finished technical product. You just be conceptual, and you could have like a piece of paper with, something written down to say, okay, where would your eye go to this? Or, would you hit this button? Or, how easy would this look to use? I think those are really like key components, because the great thing about KP is that it's not up to the operations folks to know what the end product's going to look like. And, we have these intake processes or these member feedback processes where we really do have a good system to where I have an idea conceptually that is built upon through iterative steps and feedback through either subject matter experts or the end users, which obviously that's who we're trying to serve. So.
Yeah, it's really unique. I mean, the way that it seems, you're basically putting, put the business problem first, put the people first, and sort of the technology, services, the human element of what's being delivered. I think a lot of times, the world and the industry might have it backwards, where you start with the technology and sort of, try to fit it into the way that people kind of go about their business. But Kaiser, obviously, the uniqueness from where I sit from afar, is by doing it the right way, and understanding that, we start with what are the problems, what are those, opportunities for automation. And then as we develop technology, being able to continually involve other constituents to optimize the technology. I think that just philosophy is very unique.
Yep, I agree.
So you mentioned earlier data analytics and the access to just volumes and volumes of data. I'd like to go back to that.
Sure.
So what role does data analytics play in optimizing business operations or performance improvement at Kaiser? And how do you leverage the data effectively?
Yeah, so like all organizations, like I said, we have lots of data. To me, what separates KP as far as how we leverage data is the relationship that we have with business intelligence. And that is absolutely paramount to leveraging our data effectively. I love the way our business intelligence department is set up in Georgia. Our senior director, Leslie Pugh, has worked really hard to optimize how this is set up. So we have centers of excellence, is what they're called, that integrate with the different business units. So we have an entire team on the business intelligence group who is dedicated to just the continuum. So I know those analysts very well. They work with me all the time. If you pull up Microsoft Viva Engage and see who like my top collaborators are, like business intelligence will probably be 50% of them. So one of the key factors that makes it so important is that when we're trying to leverage data, we're trying to leverage data in as real time as possible. So claims is very retroactive, right? So we might get claims 3 months after they happen, or 2 months or whatever it might be. So really to leverage data to effectively implement some kind of intervention in real time, it has to be data that is usually entered, by the frontline staff. And so or we might have referral data or authorization data or whatever that might be. Those are very workflow driven processes. So you need business intelligence analysts who understand your workflows, because if you're going to design, reporting structures off of manually inputted data, or data that's captured through some kind of process that is on the front end of the service that we're providing, then you need to have an understanding of the workflows. And our business intelligence analysts spend a lot of time truly understanding how we do things so that they can effectively model our data so that it's relevant and it's actually capturing what we're doing. And if you don't do that, then you can't use real-time data. So I think that's a really important component of how we leverage analytics, is that relationship that we have and that we are very close with them. The other, key imperative of the organization is that we have kind of a philosophy where we're trying to use key performance indicators that are they align to organizational strategic goals and long-term objectives. So, we might have an organizational imperative to optimize care transitions. And the key performance indicator for that could be readmissions. Okay, so you have a quantitative measure for the success and outcome of business objective that aligns to that strategic goal. So you have key performance indicators, right? And then you have key action indicators, which are derived from and connect to those KPIs. So we want to quantify performance of operations and program outcomes and the status of strategic initiatives, implementations. So in the context of the example I just gave, we might have post-discharge follow-up appointment rate and medication reconciliation could be key action indicators for readmission as a KPI. And then you have operational metrics, which measure how individual business functions operate. So we might have average number of days between discharge and follow-up appointment, or percentage of follow-up appointments completed, or percentage of home health visits out of those scheduled, something like that. So having that tie-in to the organizational strategy and to make sure your data is reflecting that, because that should drive your decisions.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And honestly, it's what I see a lot is that people sort of, they want to kind of bypass the foundational sort of data elements of a broader strategy. And what KP's done really, amazingly well is leveraging the experience, leveraging the access, leveraging all of the expertise around data and how it affects all of those different facets to the point where now I have to imagine that becomes sort of the foundation as you start thinking about AI and sort of what we do as next steps in sort of that, I'll say, data analytics and sort of AI spectrum.
Yeah.
I'd love to transition now to talking a little bit about how you see AI impacting the world. And where I'd love to start is sort of big picture, right? As you think about AI, how do you envision AI impacting staff efficiency, let's say at the industry level, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we drill that down to KP specifically.
Yeah, I'm extremely bullish on AI and its potential to basically revolutionize how we work. Yeah, I think because of my responsibilities in the non-clinical realm, I can probably say that, I think a lot of how I think about AI is probably transferable to other industries, but, mundane administrative tasks that require some degree of creativity could easily be done with the assistance of AI. Now, I don't think it's going to be, you always have to vet and review the output. And even if it does 60% of the job, that's still better than 0%, which is what we had prior to this, right? So, mundane administrative responsibilities, I think business intelligence is not just in healthcare, right? So there's business intelligence in every field. Having the ability to build queries with natural language significantly can expedite business intelligence processes. So it takes a long time to code things, and having the ability to use natural language with a subject matter expert actually writing that and using that natural language can help expedite that. So you can develop and test hypotheses from raw data. You can expedite the time to create advanced visualizations. I mean, if people are using programming languages like Python or R, like sometimes it can take a while to create some advanced visualization. So like having the ability to use generative AI for that purpose could absolutely expedite that. I see a lot of opportunity for optimization of staffing and resource allocation. I'll say that AI can analyze, patterns in flow, right, or whatever flow might be. So for us, it would be patient flow, but it could be, invoices for some manufacturing company, whatever it might be. Can analyze patterns in flow and basically staff workflow and resource utilization to optimize staffing schedules and resource utilization, right? So, if you have this advanced algorithm that can predict busy periods and staffing needs, then you can ensure you have the right number of people on hand to meet the demand of whatever it is that you're supplying. I think, the other large bucket I think about with AI that's non-healthcare specific, it's training and education. Typically, training and educational materials take a long time to develop. And this would significantly expedite development. And let's say I have like a training document, but I might not learn the same way you do, right? So if I have some training materials, let's say I'm more of a visual person and like videos resonate with me better. And it's going to take me a long time to read a 25-page training manual. Being able to convert your training materials from one medium to another to adapt to the users, is absolutely really a groundbreaking. I mean, I can't tell you enough. Being in my job and seeing how people learn differently, there's no one way to ensure that, okay, this document's going to be, or this file or this training medium is going to be perfect for everybody. Everyone learns differently. And so being able to leverage AI to like cross between those mediums, I think will help with the onboarding process, which in healthcare takes quite a long time, depending on how complex the organization is. And, KP is pretty complex. So, right. So, anything we can do to help expedite the onboarding process is good.
I think those are some great examples. So now let's talk specifically about KP. So can you share some insights into how you anticipate that AI is going to transform, let's say, day-to-day non-clinical operations from a workflow perspective in your world?
Yeah, and I'll say this as a preface, but this is purely how we're going to think about this, because obviously KP is a huge organization. We have 215,000 employees. So people are going to have different views about this, but just from my area, AI can and will have a transformative impact on our operations and our workflows. So compliance, for example, with CMS regulations or NCQA accreditation or contractual obligations is critical to ensuring that we provide quality care for our members. Typically, the regulations and accreditation, I shouldn't say typically, I say always, regulations and accreditation are built such that, by adhering to them, we are providing quality care to our members. So we're constantly reviewing policies and procedures to make sure that they're updated to remain compliant with regs and accreditation standards. AI could help streamline that process by quickly identifying potential non-compliance issues. So let's say we have like a new CMS ruling, and then that comes out, and we can ask AI, say, hey, compare our policies for blank with the new CMS ruling and identify potential areas of concern. Now, in current state, we do that, but it's manually intensive. We don't have AI to help do that, right? So that takes a lot of resources, that takes a lot of staff power and a lot of time to do that. Now, that's not to say, again, caveat, AI is not going to replace any of our compliance staff. We still need subject matter experts for compliance, but it can be a tool that helps expedite that compliance process to realize better outcomes and to be more prescriptive about the things that need to change. Because right now,
and just like a nurse or a physician, kind of keeping them at the top of almost their license, right? They're not clinical in nature, but it's kind of the same philosophy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're always, as much as you can reduce non-value adding time, regardless of what that job is, that's what we're trying to do. Some other examples would be like workflow optimization and reconciliation. So for anybody in healthcare, I'm sure they can probably attest to the fact that healthcare operations is very workflow driven. We have lots and lots and lots of workflows. And so, what I would love to do, and I think the technology is there, is to have, generative AI or some AI tool that can reconcile and combine workflows. So consolidate and make them easier to interpret, to access. If you have 500 workflows floating around, that's not functional for your staff to use. And honestly, you want your staff to be able to quickly access stuff because they're not going to remember everything, right? There's no way you could remember 500 workflows. So how do you make it so that it's easy to find and easy to read? And it's not hard to parse out, here's the workflow for this, here's what you do for this. So reconciling and combining workflows, also developing workflows from scratch. If let's say I have a meeting with you and we're talking about, okay, here's how we want this process to go. We record that meeting, and now I can upload that recording into a generative AI tool that can just create that process map for me. And if I have to make some edits to it, great, but at least I don't have to start from scratch, So there's that conception to development process that can speed it up. Business writing, job descriptions, playbooks, anything that takes, again, a significant amount of effort. It's hard to quantify really having good playbooks and processes and workflows from a dollar standpoint. But anybody who works in this area and you work in operations, you understand how absolutely essential those are. So, if we have these tools there, you don't have to justify adding additional resources to start developing these things that maybe need to be developed or maybe need to be revised or maybe need to be edited. Because we have a lot of work, obviously, and the more tools we can use to basically scale our ability without adding additional resources is always advantageous. Other components, I'd say project management. Good project management is dependent upon being organized, preparing for meetings, taking great notes, ensuring everyone is aware of follow-up items. This is obviously very manually intensive. It takes a lot of time to be organized and to make sure the documentation is easy to read and functional to use. So the ability to summarize meeting notes, the ability to summarize action items and add them to any kind of project plan. Right now, that, again, is manually intensive. We have people, resources dedicated to doing that who could be doing different things or who could be practicing to the top of their scope, like you said. I think those are some things. And I guess lastly, I'll end on development of operational applications. So healthcare, at least I have not found this to be the case, but healthcare, we don't have a lot of pure software developers in healthcare, right? So democratizing the ability to create applications would be a great boon for us. So, Power Automate, Power Apps, et cetera, are great, but they're not the most intuitive to use. So if you have AI that can help mitigate that knowledge gap starting off, you as an operational user can create these applications to just kind of solve small business problems. It doesn't have to be like an extensive app, but those are, again, it's something that really we could benefit a lot from, that we just kind of don't have the ability to do right now without devoting a significant amount of time away from other essential responsibilities or initiatives that we're working on.
It's so interesting to me because, regardless of whether you're talking about the non-clinical space of healthcare, the clinical space of healthcare, finance, retail, kind of take your pick. It's amazing to me just the similarities in terms of what people are trying to achieve with the technology. And it's all about, how do I layer in the technology to make people sort of more effective at what they do, and to deliver on those KPIs that, are well thought out and you sort of described earlier. So to me, that's a really interesting sort of trend that you see not just in healthcare, not just in, healthcare operations, but I think really truly across the board. It's about trying to make people more efficient, which is interesting to me also because there's this whole sort of fear of AI that it's coming for my job. And what you're describing, there certainly will be sort of, puts and takes and so on and so forth from a labor perspective. But what you're really describing is making people, human beings, more effective at what they do through the use of the technology. And I think
I don't agree. I mean, yes, there might be I think the more people are going to find benefit from AI than those who don't, meaning the AI could potentially replace them. I don't see that happening in our organization. Our organization is very committed to the resources and understanding that it takes people to do stuff. But just like you said, there is that fear. What I've kind of adopted the philosophy that AI is not going to take my job, but somebody who uses AI could take my job, because
that's a great way to put it. I like that a lot.
It's going to make them 10 times more productive. And I am firmly a believer in that. So, I've ever since ChatGPT came out and I realized what generative AI was capable of, it really got me down this rabbit hole and got me interested in how we can leverage this technology, because it does allow you the ability to do so many different things and just kind of reduces the critical pathway and time that it takes to realize an outcome or to realize some kind of end goal. So definitely on the bullish side of AI, and I guess would encourage everybody who's interested, just take the time to learn it because it's important.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think, our organization, Taylor, looks at it through a very, very similar lens. I think we view it as a force multiplier for, humans, for, our people, for, the world to sort of use in concert with the human mind, right? And to optimize what we're able to all accomplish. So really interesting to hear you describe that.
Yep.
I'm curious. So as you think about sort of where the puck is going, right, where the industry is going, what kind of trends do you foresee in terms of integrating AI and technology into healthcare operations? If I look over the next, maybe short term in terms of 12 to 24 months, but then sort of from a visionary perspective, what's capable in this space? Where do you think we could be heading?
Well, I think healthcare is going to be slow to adopt, as we typically are with
as usual, right?
Right. I mean, and to a degree, that's kind of just a result of business, right? So, I mean, we have to ensure that everything we do is compliant with HIPAA and all the PHI rules. And so you can't just jump into technology without thoroughly vetting that it's safe, that it's not going to have biases, that there's going to be equity in the outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, slow to adopt, 100%. I do think, I mentioned this predictive analytics, but an increased adoption of predictive analytics, because that being able to actually create predictive analytics at this point, you really have to have data scientists to be able to do that. And there's a lot of data scientists, but I don't think a majority of them are in healthcare, right? They're in different tech fields, or they might be in other industries, or finance, whatever it might be. So I think it's going to help increase predictive analytics. I see a lot of potential in clinical decision support. Now, as a non-clinician, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in this, but yeah, I mean, if you have the ability for an AI algorithm to be able to, process a lot of information in real time, to be able to, make treatment suggestions, or to be able to help diagnose something, with the caveat that physicians will always be the ones to make the decisions, right? But having AI could help you reduce non-value adding clerical responsibilities for physicians and allow them to actually do what they were trained to do, is be present with patients and take care of patients, right? So I see clinical decision support and that adoption increasing as time goes on. I've mentioned this already, but automation of administrative processes, and I think enhanced patient engagement and personalization. You have AI that could help with customer service. It can help answer a lot of questions. So, healthcare is really hard to navigate. Health literacy and understanding how the healthcare system works. It's not, you don't get like a training manual on it, right? So if you have the ability to have like a chatbot, or you have, some kind of AI tool that can help guide members on, where do I go from here? What's the next step? It's kind of like, having an automated advocate for them, right? So like, okay, you just got this stress test done, and now you need to go do this, and whereas in the past, people may not know they needed to have a follow-up, or, they may, whatever it might be. I wouldn't be surprised if healthcare had advanced security and privacy protections as well, that was using AI for that purpose. Obviously, with the advent of AI, there's going to be increased threats. So you would expect a field like healthcare to try to secure its data as much as humanly possible. That would be another trend that I would expect to see. But again, that's kind of way outside my field of expertise. So, somebody who's in the IT field might be able to say, hey, we're already doing that, or we already have AI doing that. But I would expect to see an adoption of that as well.
Yeah, again, really interesting. And a lot of similarities and parallels that you can draw. And the example on the clinical side, obviously, I'm not clinical either, but certainly the example in terms of clinical decision support and so on and so forth, I think connects directly with some of the things that you were describing earlier, where we have this mass of data that's available to us, through the lens of, a patient's chart and, clinical best practices, trials. You go kind of down the rabbit hole of all the clinical data that's available, not dissimilar from an operations perspective. The ability to distill all of that and make that sort of a multiplier for the physician, for the human, is a really interesting prospect.
Yep, agree.
Is there anything else that you want to share with the community that either you're working on, that you're excited about, anything at all in closing?
Yeah, I think what I have the ability to divulge. So I know KP is testing technology to use a generative AI scribe, which will be able to generate first drafts of clinical notes. So kind of hitting on one of the previous topics that I just mentioned, but again, reducing non-value adding clerical responsibilities for our physicians. So allowing them to be more present with members, to allow them more time to take care of patients. Very excited about this, with the caveat that we are very judicious when evaluating new technologies, as is appropriate in healthcare. So we'll evaluate for performance, for safety, for clinical usability, accuracy, satisfaction, equity, before implementing at scale. So that's something that we're trying out, and I'm very excited to see the results of that, and hopefully see that scaled out at large, because anything that allows our physicians to do more with members is advantageous for us.
It's incredibly interesting, and I hope that you'll come back and join us as you progress through that project to update us and the listeners.
Yeah, I would love to. Hopefully we'll have a lot more we can talk about then too, as far as our internal projects.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Rob. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, Chris.
Absolutely. And thank you also to our listeners. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep growing the show. And if you'd like to learn a little more about Taylor Healthcare and the digital healthcare experience, you can go to taylor.com/digital-healthcare. That's it for today. And until next time, this is Chris Civitarice wishing you health and good cheer. Take care.
To learn more about Taylor Healthcare, please visit taylor.com/digital-healthcare. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice or services. The Digital Healthcare Experience is produced by Naomi Schwimmer. Podcast music by Nicholas Bach.